of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Narita?
Here.
Chair Rowinski?
Here.
Commissioner Michael? Here. Okay. And Commissioner Robbins and Commissioner Riddlemeyer are absent and excused.
Okay. Thank you. We are excited to be here and to offer two ways to participate in tonight's meeting. One is in person and the other is virtual. For those attending in person, please complete a yellow request to speak slip found at the front of the room and hand the slip to the Madam Clerk. If participating virtually, there are two ways. First is to click on the Zoom link found on the top of tonight's agenda. Use the raise your hand feature and you will be called upon at the appropriate time. When called upon, let us know who you are and please provide your comments to the Commission. The other way to participate virtually is by phone, and that is calling 408-638-0968. Once again, 408-638-0968, and enter the conference ID number 89 77 19 15 21, the number 3, once again 89 77 19 15 21, the number 3, and finally enter the passcode 880430, 880430, and press the hash or pound key. Press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. And please introduce yourself, followed by comments to the Commission. We welcome speakers providing public comment, but please be advised this is a limited public forum. As such, speakers must stay on topic. If speaking to a particular agenda item, and if during the general public comment period, they must address matters that are within the subject matter or the jurisdiction of the city. If a speaker fails to follow these rules, I regret I will need to warn the speaker that they are off topic. If a speaker continues to disregard the rules, I will end the speaker's opportunity to speak. Public comment for each of the agenda items will remain available until all public comments to the Commission have been made. At that point, I will close public comment for that specific agenda item. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. There is one item, that is to approve the minutes from the regular Commission meeting of October 11th. Do I have a motion?
Through the chair, I had a small edit I'd like to make. Thank you so much. So there was a part of the minutes that said something around not accepting anomalous data the next time, and this was for the issue of the accepting the report from the Bay Meadows area. I'm sorry, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but basically it's not that my comment was that I would not accept anomalous data, is that I will not accept the conclusion that the data is anomalous because some kind of failure to compare data in an apples-to-apples way between this year's data and the prior year's data and then that future year's data, given the fact that they're changing vendors to do the data. And that was my comment. It's different than what was written. Thank you.
So can we incorporate that in? Okay. That'll show up Please, yep.
That'll show up on the next minutes, the next, on the December 13th.
Right, in
It'll show
December.
amended and the corrected comment.
Okay, all righty. And so based on that, then, we should, I'll ask again, do we have a motion, assuming Commissioner Narita's comments will be incorporated into the September meeting minutes? Do I have a motion?
Oh, I'll move.
I can make a motion to approve.
Okay, I'll second. Madam Clerk, roll call?
Commissioner Narita,
Aye.
Chair Rowinski,
Aye.
Commissioner Michael.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, thank you. The next item on tonight's meeting is the general public comment section for people wishing to comment on an item not appearing on tonight's agenda. And once again, the item needs to be within the subject matter or jurisdiction of the city. State law prevents the commission from acting on any of the matters presented to us. However, the comments are most welcomed. And staff and the commission will take note and may consider them for inclusion into future commission meetings. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers in person? Okay. Virtually, either both by phone or the link?
There's 2 hands raised.
Okay. All righty. Please, hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Henry.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the time. I'm Henry Hertz, a subject matter expert in telecommunications law and policy and an expert in measuring and mitigating RF microwave radiation exposures. In the agendized item later tonight, you will hear evidence to support the appeal of a small wires facility on Virginia Avenue, but my comments right now are not specific to that application. My comment is general. The purpose is to provide accurate context and to allow the commissioners to discern between 3 important things. Number 1, the current federal telecommunications laws stand on their own. Number 2, FCC regulations may or may not have the force of law, and that depends on the rulings in the U.S. Supreme Court and the U.S. Courts of Appeals, which trim back many FCC orders and basically make them illegal. And these rulings are what binds the city of San Mateo. There's a big misunderstanding in your materials when you view them, because many claims are made that FCC Order 18-133 is more than a presumptive order. It is not. Presumptive means it's for guidance only. It does not have the force of law. And we know that's true because the FCC's attorney, Scott Novak, who argued the case himself in February 10th of 2020, says right up front, this order is not self-enforcing. The order contemplates the need in many circumstances for further case-by-case adjudication. So they're going to have to go back into court. So many of the claims in that order do not have the force of law, and that is true of many FCC orders. This is what gets confusing. Many applicants claim the FCC orders are law. They are not. They must be consistent with the underlying 1934 Telecom Act as amended in 1996 and 2012. The federal judge summed it up very well. Quote, it's not up to the FCC to put words in the Telecommunications Act that aren't there. Therefore, there's 3 main cases that are very important to understand because they change the whole viewpoint on the small cell agenda. There was a 2019 Kitawa versus FCC ruling that wiped out the attempted NEPA and NHB exemption. Every single tower must have this by law. There was a 2019 Mozilla versus FCC ruling that said the FCC reclassified broadband as an unregulated information service. This means that you cannot have preemption for anything that doesn't provide phone service. Really important because your local code only talks about telecommunications/phone service.
Okay, Henry, your time
Yes.
is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Second speaker?
Hello, my name is Allison McQueen, and I'm a San Mateo City resident, parent, and avid bicyclist. 3 children have been hit by vehicles in the last month in San Mateo while walking or biking to school. Let's observe a brief moment of quiet reflection that our children are not safe on our San Mateo City streets. These incidents occurred in our South Shoreview, North Shoreview, and North Central neighborhoods. I hope we don't have to hold a moment of silence for a student that is killed by a vehicle in the future. Let's use all the tools in our toolbox to make sure that doesn't happen. Not on my watch, and most certainly not on your watch. The vehicle-bicycle incident on October 18th occurred right around the corner from my home in North Shoreview at the intersection of 2nd and Quebec. I've traveled through this intersection thousands of times as I must pass through it to leave the North Shoreview neighborhood. It's never been safe. I request the following at this problematic intersection, 2nd and Quebec. Number 1, a 4-way stop. Number 2, longer red striping on curbs to increase visibility. Number 3, a 4-way crosswalk. This is a major thoroughfare to the Bay Trail, St. Timothy's School, and North Shoreview Montessori School. I'm organizing the Ruby Bridges Walk to School event next Tuesday to North Shoreview Montessori School. I proposed a route that would have taken students through the 2nd and Quebec intersection, the most direct route to school. A City of San Mateo Parks employee recommended a different route that avoids 2nd and Quebec due to safety concerns. Everyone knows this intersection is dangerous. Let's change that. This is a bigger problem than just one intersection. I regularly bike to Caltrain from North Shoreview to get to work. My husband bikes every day, rain or shine, to work. My children regularly bike to school. Biking in San Mateo is not safe. I was ironically almost hit by a construction truck on the way to a safety meeting, a bicycle safety meeting with the City of San Mateo a couple weeks ago. When a cyclist dies on the road, a white bicycle is placed at the scene of the accident. It's called a ghost bike. This month, we had 3 injury accidents involving children. I'll call them yellow bikes or warning bikes. Consider these 3 accidents a warning to act. This commission is on notice that our streets are not safe, and we're responsible for making progress without delay. Please join me in promoting progressive transportation policies that benefit our entire city, and especially our children. Maybe next year's Ruby Bridges Walk can pass through the new and improved 2nd and Quebec intersection that the City of San Mateo made safer. A girl can dream. Let's make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Okay, any more speakers?
No more.
No more. Okay, and none in person. All right, we will close out this agenda item and move to our next agenda item. That is concluding general public comment. And now we'll move to the public hearing to consider an appeal from a resident related to a city-approved small cell permit in their neighborhood. I think it's important, everyone, that based on instruction from the city, that this appeal is to proceed as normal, that is, under the current city's ordinance for small cell installations. Are the residents who filed the appeal, I believe, Kelly? Okay, all right. Can I say Kelly or Ms. Ryan? Okay, Kelly's fine? All righty, great. So how we'll proceed with this appeal, everyone, is we'll start with a presentation from Mr. Halara. He is a senior engineer for the city. We will return. You'll have your time. You'll have ample time. We'll return back to the commission for questions. And at that point, Kelly can go ahead and make her presentation. And once again, you have a maximum of 15 minutes. And I would encourage you to ensure that your presentation focuses on the written appeal that you wrote to us. And not to recap what had taken place on Monday. We're all aware of that, so thank you. But to focus in on your specific appeal. So once Kelly makes her presentation, we'll open it up for public comment. And then in the event there is public comment that is not supportive of the appeal, Kelly will have a chance to rebut that particular comment. Once we're done with that, and we're through with public comments and any rebuttals, it will come back to the commission. That is the final, oops, let me just see here. Oh, all right, sorry, everyone. Hold up. Okay. So once once we are through with public comments and all rebuttals, we'll come back to the commission for, thank you, for final comments from the commission, and we will take a vote. So there is a motion. The motion is to deny or approve the appeal. Staff is recommending denying the appeal. So on that note, Mr. Hilaire.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
Also online via Zoom link, Stephanie Hall, who's an attorney here to advise the commission on matters legal and procedure. I believe she's available now, correct, Madam Clerk?
I'm available, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Okay, please, Mr. Hilaire.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioner. My name is Jason Hilaire, Senior Engineer in Public Works, and this is our presentation on the wireless permit appeal at 380 Virginia Avenue. The agenda for my presentation is I'll go over this appeal hearing, I'll discuss our wireless permit review process and the city limitations. I'll discuss the wireless permit appeal process, and then I'll give you background on the permit and the appeal. I'll close with my staff recommendation and discuss the next steps. So for this public hearing, it's involving a permit that staff had reviewed and approved because we believed it satisfied our ordinance and FCC regulations. The appeal is based on zoning and property values. Staff is going to recommend that we deny the appeal and uphold the conditional approval of the permit, and then at the end, commission will need to consider the appeal and make a motion to either grant or deny the appeal. Here's our permitting process. It begins with the application review, which is subject to CEQA. Applicants submit their permit, they notice the nearby residents, and then their staff will review the application per our design standards and aesthetic standards. Things that we don't review, things that we don't regulate are RF emissions, coverage capacity, objectives, and the ability to provide service. If an application complies with all of our design standards and we consider it reviewed and complete, it moves on to the conditional approval. We post a notice on the city's website and through our newsletter. There's a 5-day appeal window in which there is an appeal submitted for this one, so we're here. And then all of this has to fit within the FCC shot clock. For this one, it's an existing structure, which is 60 days. The appeal process, so there are 5 days to submit an appeal. This appeal was submitted within the window. The appellant has the burden of proof to provide evidence to overturn city's review decision. And the things that we review on, again, are site location, pole selection, and design criteria. FCC regulations preempt us from regulating RF emissions based on that are compliant with FCC regulations. And the other things we can't really control are we can't control coverage or capacity objectives for providers, and the other things are property values are not in our review process. They're not a design criteria that we review by our ordinance or our design standards. They're subjective and speculative in nature, making it pretty impractical for staff to assess. Background on the permit. It's located at Virginia Avenue and Harvard Road on the north corner. You'll see that within the 500-foot radius, there are a number of other poles in the area. There is one alternative acceptable pole. However, the applicant, when there are two acceptable poles, the applicant has the ability to choose which one they prefer to place their site on. I'll give you, this is a simulation of what they're proposing on the pole. And now I'll go into the appeal, which was submitted on 4 bases. The two that are brought forward today are the site location, being in a residential neighborhood, where the appeal says that residential is the lowest preferred zoning in our design standards, and the adverse effect on property values. The other two are FCC regulations and NEPA versus CEQA, which we are not considering. Crown's response to the first two are that the alternative sites analysis shows that all other poles within the 500-foot radius are in the same residential zoning district, and that studies have found that small cell installations do not decrease property values. So here's my staff recommendation. The permit that we reviewed satisfied our Muni code and our design standards. It complied with FCC regulations. Regarding the residential zoning, the alternative sites analysis does show that there are other poles in the area which are all in the same residential zoning, so there is no more preferred zoning within the area, within the 500-foot radius. And property values are not a criteria in our design standards or in our Muni code, so we do not consider it during our review. And I'll reiterate that it's subjective and speculative in nature, which would be impractical for staff to assess. Therefore, my recommendation is to deny the appeal and uphold the approval of the permit. The next steps are for the commission to hear this appeal, make a final decision, which would be subject to no further appeals. And if the appeal is denied, then the wireless permit would be deemed approved. If the appeal is granted, then the wireless permit would be deemed denied and be terminated. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to field your questions.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hilaire. Questions from the commission? Okay, Commissioner Michaels.
Thank you for explaining all that, and I have some clarifying questions as well to understand the process better. Because this is, a reoccurring issue that's coming to the commission about these cell towers, so I want to understand a better way of how we can handle them. So you said that the city standards are site location, pole selection, design criteria. Does that mean that's what the appeal needs to show the burden of, that it doesn't meet one of those standards?
That's correct. Basically, the appeal needs to show that staff had not the right opinion, I suppose, on what we reviewed, and maybe we missed something, and the application really should not have been approved.
So if we want to have those standards changed, or more, allow for more public input to have feedback on it, would that be something that the city council needs to decide?
So the design standards, the director of public works has the authority to revise those.
Without going through a council approval?
That's correct. It's in the Muni code that the director has the power.
Have there been discussions to do that?
There are items that we're planning to revise to clarify that are not clear in the design standards. But there's no major effort so far.
And let's say the appeal gets approved, which means the project cannot happen. Is that what?
If the appeal is approved, then the entire application will be terminated. And they can start from scratch, or they can not come back. It's basically the application is done.
So that's what I was going to ask. If it's terminated, does Castle Crown then look at one of those other alternatives in the neighborhood, or is that whole circle radius then terminated?
From my understanding, they can come back and apply it to the same pole and come at it from a different angle maybe, or they can use the alternative pole that they considered another acceptable pole. They have their option, but you're upholding or granting the appeal today just means that the current application is done.
And I have a question. Do you mind going to the slide that shows that one? Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the residents or the community would think about this, but when looking at it, number 14 looks like it's on one of those islands that may be a little bit less impactful for residents. Is that something that we could, if the residents would be more open to that one, is that something that we could ask Castle Crown to review instead of the selected ones?
I may need Crown to answer that one. It is their preference. If I recall, item 14 did not meet their coverage and capacity goals, and that's something that staff can't direct them to.
What was that again? I'm sorry, what didn't
If it's based on their coverage or capacity objectives, the staff can't direct them. So I'm not sure if Crown wanted to answer it on site 14, but from what I recall, it was outside their objectives. Typically, but medians are an acceptable location.
They are acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something we could ask for them to review before we deny or approve?
Before applications come in, we do speak with them, and they give us like their high level, and they discuss it with us at that time. And if they say it's not their target area, then staff doesn't really have anything for them to be directed at that point.
Because it seems very close to the area. I don't know, so it could be something worth just for our knowledge to know why one was chosen over the other.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Stephanie Hall on Zoom. Do you mind if I chime in?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say that if there are multiple potential sites, as are here, the city is really trying to determine if each site meets city standards and criteria. If each site does meet standards, then the city does not have the discretionary power to, Castle's hand to pick a particular site. Basically, the city is really looking at, do the proposed sites meet city criteria, and then which of those to select. As you suggested, you could request and maybe have that conversation with Crown Castle, but the city does not have that discretionary power.
Those are all my questions for now.
Okay. Vice Chair Narita.
Thanks. So Jason, just to clarify, you just said that the director does have discretion to adjust the design standards without going to city council. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And could you remind me, are the prioritization of locations within the design standard, or is that located somewhere else in guidance?
The preference of locations?
Preference of location.
Is located in our design standards.
It is located in the design standard. So technically, it is within the discretion of the city to provide more specific guidance in the design standards. It doesn't currently, but it actually is within the discretion to say islands in residential areas are preferred over poles in front of second story, like two-floor houses. Like theoretically.
Yes, we can define our preferences in those design standards.
Okay. So that's not the design standards as they are right now for the purposes of this appeal, but it is new information to me that the director has that discretion to potentially adjust design standards, and included in those design standards are the prioritized geographies of where the city would provide guidance to the companies of small cell locations within our communities.
That is correct. We can list out preferences.
Okay, thank you. That's a great clarification. And then, Stephanie, you're on the line as well?
Yes.
So just to super clarify, last time we had an appeal, legally, the commission was given the guidance that we are not able to consider anything outside of the content of the design standards and the applications when looking at the appeal. Is that also your understanding?
Correct. So the
go ahead.
municipal code provides that the commission is going to review and appeal de novo. So pursuant to that de novo review.
Oh, you cut out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
So pursuant to that de novo review, and then you cut out.
By the city's standard conditions of approval, which are included in, the ordinance and the design standards. So you're basically taking everything that staff considered when they decision on whether to approve or deny the permit, and you are then doing your own de novo review. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so only using literally the exact same information that staff used.
Correct.
And so, it's because of the fact that staff does not use things like property values or whatever other stuff that's potentially argued in an appeal, that this commission cannot also look at those other pieces of information.
Correct. As the city's design standards and requirements are now, the city does not consider property values, and so the commission cannot consider those tonight.
Great, thank you. And then oh wait, I lost my train of thought now. Oh, yes, could you provide any further elucidation on like the FCC ruling? Like, are these informative or legally binding? Like, what is your assessment of the earlier public testimony on this situation?
So they are binding. They are federal regulations. The FCC is a federal agency. I believe what the speaker was saying is that it is comparing the court cases. If the court cases were to remand or reverse an FCC order, for example. I'm assuming we might get into that discussion a bit more later. There was a case that was cited. I have a different reading on that case, so perhaps at that time we could discuss it. It was the Environmental Health Trust case, I believe. But as far as my understanding is, the RF emission standards, the FCC's been revoked.
Sorry, Stephanie, I'm sorry. I think something critical we lost you. So as far as...
So my understanding is that the RF emissions, the FCC RF emissions are still in place. They have not been revoked by a court, and therefore the city at this time still has to enforce them or abide by them.
Thank you. Okay, great, thank you. And then my last question is that I understand that there's going to be some kind of training for the commission next month. Is there anything that we need to bear in mind as maybe like a little prep for that training to consider during this appeal now? Any like procedural trainings or anything like that that we need to bear in mind today?
No, that would be separate from this appeal. Once again, we're just looking at what was provided to city staff in the application when reviewing this appeal today.
Okay.
But yeah, nothing in that meeting. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a question for staff and then two for Crown Castle. So Crown Castle, if you could step up to the mic. In the meantime, let me ask Mr. Herlar my question. In the meeting packet, it mentioned that Crown Castle modified its design of this installation based on comments from the city, from city staff. Can you describe to me what the request was in those modifications and what was the outcome?
Yes, so the original application submitted for a sidearm with the antenna similar like the one shown here. However, the original design, the shrouding looked different. It was more triangular in shape, and it had sharper edges and everything like that. So we asked them to provide different...
So let me ask you, Mr. Miller, is one the prior?
Oh, I'm sorry. Both
Yeah.
of these are the same one, but from different angles. So this
Okay.
is the approved looking simulation.
Okay, so this is the approved, and the city made a request to move from the prior to an approved. Okay, and these are the approved. And what was, once again, that request you mentioned?
Yes, so the original design was triangular in shape, and from the staff's perspective, it looked like it stood out a lot because of its odd and distinct shape, very atypical and something that's on a utility pole. So Crown had come back with a cylindrical-looking shroud. It's very typical of a shape like this on a utility pole, similar to like a transformer. And so staff felt that this is least obtrusive in the sense that people won't notice it as much because it doesn't look oddly placed.
Right. And when you say shroud, we're talking about the covering that would ride up the pole and hide, basically it conceals all the wiring.
Yes, so the arm is
Right.
also a shroud. It hides the wiring. The canister is a shroud in that it gives it a smooth silhouette and looks like a canister. The antenna, you can actually see the antenna. It's that rectangular face.
Yes.
But the shroud itself is the cylindrical bob.
Right. So the shroud is the antenna, the arm, and then the cabling
And
that
that's
would
correct.
run up along the pole. And can you show just what it was before? I just want,
If
you don't have it, that's fine.
I'm sorry, I don't have that with me.
okay, all right. Okay, so that was the request, and that's now our design, that's now the proposed, that is the design of this particular small cell.
Correct.
Okay, all righty. Crown, thank you for being here. I have a couple of questions, and my first question is related to this installation, and I'd like to hear a yes or a no. That is in this particular installation, this proposed installation, has Crown Castle provided to our staff and the city the physically smallest antenna that is available to do the work? Is this currently the physically smallest antenna to do the work? This is an Ericsson I saw. And my next question, too, because here's where I'm going. I'm going with aesthetics. And this is something that the city does have jurisdiction over. And I just want to make sure, and our staff has worked hard, we've got residents who are concerned, but I have to hear from you folks that, yes, the antenna that we're proposing and is the smallest that is physically available to do the that is to provide the coverage that we believe Crown we need.
Chair Rowinski, this question has been posed before, and a detailed response has been provided to staff and the chair. These antenna, the Ericsson antenna, are a standard size. They are, the correct antenna for the intended coverage. They're the correct antenna for the installation. The shroud itself is the correct shroud for these antenna. They are also required. There is an FCC regulation that determines how large a small cell installation can be, and they are within that size range. So long story short, they are the correct size for the task at hand, and the correct size is within the allowed size for this type of installation.
Right. So correct size could mean they're possibly not the smallest, but they are within legal bounds.
Correct. And I would go so far as to say that they are selected to be the least intrusive. They are the recommendation for this installation. There's nothing that indicates that they are the largest possible or the smallest possible. They are the correct radios for this installation.
Okay. And so they are the correct radios, not the smallest, not the largest. Were there any smaller ones available that could provide the coverage area?
So I don't have that information. I'll yield to Michael if you have some insight on other radios available.
So I can't say what's available anywhere, but these are the smallest that I've seen available for this type of installation.
Mm-hmm. The shrouding is nice. By the way, I visited the site yesterday. So, and I walked around the area, and I looked at the alternative site, and I also looked at the site on the medium. Actually, I pretty much walked to just about every pole. And I do that, by the way. When we have appeals, I visit every appeal site. And staff, by the way, provides us a very detailed map with all the poll numbers. And if you look at polls, there's numbers on them, typically 4 digits. So we know we are looking at the right polls. So, okay, so what I hear, correct, but possibly not the smallest, but not the largest, and we don't know if there is something smaller that could be available. And that would be a good question, Mr. Larry, because you look at these, and just to inquire that what we are looking at is the smallest when we're going through this process. To do the job. We understand we've got coverage issues, but we need to make sure we're getting the smallest possible units up there. They'll be up there, they could be up there for, 10-ish years or so. My second question has to go with we have the primary and alternative candidates. The alternative was poll 3 on the corner of Parrott and Harvard. There's a nice, beautiful oak I did see close to that pole. In there, in our notes, it mentions alternative 3. Let me back up here. Crown believes the primary candidate is a better option to meet RF coverage and capacity criteria than alternative 3. The nice thing I'll share with you about alternative 3 is it does have a little cover from oaks. There's a nice big oak there. And it did catch my attention, but once again, you have the choice on these 2 polls. But I'm just curious, what was it about putting it in the proposed spot versus the alternative 3 location?
So our full team, we have RF engineers, utility folks, permitting folks, construction folks. When we're looking at these sites, they're all included to make sure that it'll work for all parties, right? That we can build it, that it'll work from RF, that it'll work to get a permit with the city. Why that particular site, this site was chosen over the other, I don't know. It would have been our RF engineers giving us some insight as to why. In this particular instance, it's the same zoning, and so there's not anything to indicate off the top of my head that there was a particular reason why they chose this one over the other. There may have been minor things that made this a little bit better. But I don't want to say exactly what those are to you without having spoken to some of our team and knowing exactly.
Right. And I think for future meetings, I think it would be good to have an engineer here.
Okay.
And I think we might have mentioned that last month on the Armada appeal. Because some of our questions could be legal, some of them could be technical. And the documents that you provide to us are highly technical documents. They're well written, I will say that, but some of them do beg questions. So, regardless to some degree, whether it's at one corner or the other, they're roughly 200-ish feet away. It's just that on the corner of Parrott and Harvard, you do have that oak. Maybe that could obscure some signal, I don't know. But that could have been a location as well. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you, Crown. Kelly, would you like to come up and present your appeal to us? And once again, stay within your appeal, possible.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. First, I just have to put a qualifier that I spent my day today driving my dad to cancer treatments, and it was horrible. And so this is especially poignant for me right now. And I really thank you guys for even taking the time to listen. So I actually come with great news, and I'm glad that the lawyer, I think Stephanie, is on the call, because I've heard from the city now several times that your hands are tied in terms of being able to grant appeals on small cell facility applications that have been littered throughout our residential neighborhood, as we just saw. But it is not true. Your hands are not tied, and I am excited to tell you guys why. Next slide. These are just next slide. Here, perfect. Or actually, can you go back one? Why is that different? No, it's different. Can I see what yours is?
Can we pause the time? Can we pause the time right now? Perhaps since we're doing time, I might say a couple things really quickly. That I want to make it clear that these cell towers that are going...
Hi, we're not on official time yet.
Oh, we're not on official time.
Yeah, we're going to reset the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay, we need to, are we on time? Looks like it. Okay. All right, please.
Okay. Can we have the slides back? Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay. So the city has more authority to regulate these facilities than what the industry has been claiming. The city amended its municipal code in 2021 that has a provision which states, any wireless permit, city pole license, or other authorized use of the public right-of-way granted under this chapter may be revoked or modified for cause in accordance with the provisions of this section. So within that section, number 3, the director may revoke or modify the permit, city pole license, or right to use if it makes any of the findings provided in the design standards and application requirements. Next slide. Within the design standards and application requirements, we find here the compliance with applicable laws. All wireless facilities shall be installed and maintained in compliance with all applicable laws, regulations, codes, or other rules, which include, at a minimum, uniform building, electrical code, and all FCC rules for human exposure to RF emissions. Since the time that the municipal code was enacted in 2021, we've had a substantive change of law with the case number 2010-25 EHT versus FCC. Next slide. So the Environmental Health Trust sued the FCC, claiming that the FCC cannot extend the guideline to frequencies above 6,000 megahertz. So it still stands. It hasn't been revoked, up to 6,000 megahertz. For reference, the antennas that are being suggested for the site at 380 Virginia are 28,000 megahertz versus the 6,000 where the guideline limit is. And 3 of those 28,000 megahertz antennas. So we're talking a big difference. The U.S. Court of Appeals ruled in 2021 that the FCC needs to do 3 different things. I'm going to start here with number 2. Address the impacts of RF radiation on children, the health implications of long-term exposure to RF radiation, the ubiquity of wireless devices, and other technological developments that have occurred since the Commission last updated its guidelines. And number 3, address the impacts of RF radiation on the environment before they are allowed to change the guidelines to extend past 6,000 megahertz. Next slide. More simplified, the federal court vacated the extension of the FCC RF microwave radiation exposure guideline to frequencies above 6,000 megahertz and mandated that the FCC evaluate the research on how their exposure guideline adequately protects against harmful effects to exposure on RF radiation. Next slide. So in the conditional approval you guys sent me, it says the permit must comply with the standard conditions of approval for wireless communications facilities in the public rights of way pursuant to the San Mateo Municipal Code. So let's go and see what that code says. So here's the code. The Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission on Appeal shall have the discretion to modify standard conditions of approval if the cell facility does not maintain compliance with applicable laws, which is the case here. So these are some additional existing municipal code violations. Here is one: the city may not regulate the placement, construction, and modification of wireless service facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with the FCC regulations concerning such emissions. And so the ruling from the U.S. Court of Appeals case 2010-25 that I mentioned applies to the site at 380 Virginia because the antennas are 28,000 megahertz each, which has not been approved via this court order. Next. Another violation, the applicant has demonstrated that its proposed wireless facility will be in compliance with all applicable FCC rules and regulations for human exposure to RF emissions. So now San Mateo has to provide substantial written evidence to prove that there is an FCC RF microwave radiation exposure guideline for 28,000 megahertz times 3, and there isn't one. If no such evidence can be cited, then the issuance of a permit does not follow the federal law as modified in 2021. So this permit should be denied and the appeal should be approved. Within Crown Castle's own master license, it states that Crown Castle must comply with all laws related to maximum permissible exposure to EMF emissions on or about the license area, which includes all applicable FCC standards. Crown Castle does not comply with the city's telecommunication ordinance for the reasons that I've already presented. When the city considers whether to approve or disapprove any wireless permit application, the city may consider, number 2, compliance with any applicable laws, and 5, any potential visual or aesthetic impacts as set forth in the laws. Both are reasons to grant our appeal.
So you mentioned, Madam Chair, that you did hear our discussion on Monday. And so I won't go too much into the industry, insurance issues, but I do just want to reiterate that the wireless industry cannot get insurance to cover any injuries, illness, or death from RF microwave radiation exposures. The largest reinsurers in the world, Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, AM Best, and others, acted over a decade ago to exclude from their general liability policies any claims of injury, illness, or death arising out of, resulting from, or contributed to by electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic radiation, electromagnetism, radio waves, or noise. Under our government code, suit can be brought for dangerous conditions of public property. We did talk about, and we placed into the record, Attorney Lehman's 2017 letter to State Capitol saying once the involved cellular antenna box is attached to the involved city utility pole, according to the doctrine of fixtures, a melding takes place, and plaintiff's counsel will allege, as consistent with the law, that the melded unit as a whole is public property. So the city is opening itself up to lawsuits because it will fall on them. The liability for cellular microwave injury shifts from the telecom industry, you can do next slide please, to the city government. And the site developers did not tell you that. The city can require multi-million-dollar bonds from the wireless applicants per wireless facility for guaranteed self-assurance. The current master licensing agreement with Crown Castle can be canceled due to fraud in the inducement by Crown Castle not disclosing this liability transfer. Now, regarding NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, so the FCC itself does require that every single wireless telecommunications facility must complete NEPA review. There's no evidence in the record that the applicant completed NEPA review, which is why we have filed an official complaint with the FCC for this permit in question. The FCC has responded and is currently investigating this. So there's no evidence, like I said, and Crown Castle is bound to follow all federal rulings, including NEPA. So the city itself may not follow it, but Crown Castle must follow all federal rulings. Per case number 18-1129, United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Indians versus FCC in 2019, the DC Circuit mandated that the FCC also complete the following work. The ruling in case above cited vacated portions of the FCC Order 1830, which was hoping to accelerate wireless broadband deployment by removing barriers to infrastructure investment. Quote, per the ruling, we conclude that it's impossible on this record to credit the claim that small cell deregulation will leave, quote, little to no environmental footprint, Order 41. The FCC failed to assess the harms that can attend deployments that do not require new construction, particularly the cumulative harms from densification. We conclude that the FCC fails to justify its conclusion that small cells as a class and by their nature are inherently unlikely to trigger concerns. By ignoring the extent to which it already streamlines review, the Commission overstated the burdens of review and fails to explain why the categorical exclusions in place did not already minimize unnecessary costs while preserving review for deployments with greater potential environmental impacts. Per the ruling, we hold the order's deregulation of small cells is arbitrary and capricious because its public interest analysis did not meet the standard of reasoned decision-making. So, therefore, local governments can make the FCC's completion of this court-mandated work an explicit requirement for wireless facilities application completement. Per Garnet Hanley, Division Chief of the FCC, when it modified its rules after this Kituwa versus FCC ruling, we, the FCC, took the position that we are reviewing small wireless facilities as federal undertakings and major federal actions pursuing to the DC Circuit decision. So the NEPA complaint process must be followed and honored. San Mateo has to abide by federal rulings as well, and any construction operation of these small cell facilities that have not had the review must stop. Interestingly, I wanted to mention, if I have some time still, the permitting supervisor for Crown Castle, when presenting on record to this commission in June, stated to your commission, we don't want to put these, quote, in front of somebody's house, obviously, with emphasis on obviously. As seen on the map on the San Mateo site, San Mateo is being saturated with these facilities, and the majority are placed right in front of homes, in front of bedrooms, in front of nurseries, literally steps away. None of these towers are needed. They do nothing to improve cell phone service. As stated previously, they're equipped with Ericsson Street macro antennas 6705, each of which transmits pulsed RF microwave radiation at 28,000 megahertz. Such antennas can deliver only wireless information service for broadband internet, but not wireless service for wireless phone calls. Anyone who has cable internet already gets internet through cabled companies. There is no need for these antennas to provide internet service. So in summary, these are not consistent with the current FCC microwave radiation emissions guidelines. We're not saying that the FCC's guidelines were removed. We're saying that they were not allowed to be expanded. Their attempt was remanded. Maybe someone can correct me what vacated and remanded means. And we do ask you today to deny the permit.
If we could go to the, towards the end, oh, one back.
Where's our
Yeah,
timer?
so the design standards.
Where's the timer?
Okay, thank you. So back to the design standards as well. Yeah, perfect, thank you. City of San Mateo seeks to permit wireless carriers to install wireless community facilities. Okay, so we don't want to significantly detract from the city streetscapes, which you mentioned. And I thank you for taking a walk through and taking a look. There's no way around it, and it's so arbitrary for all of us to talk about it, but no one wants that on that bucolic, amazing street. Along that whole wire there, you have all these sweet birds that gather, and they will no longer. And it's really an eyesore to have anything on any of those poles. So just from that standpoint alone, I don't think it's like preserving the what is the official term? The feeling of the neighborhood.
The charm and the feel of the character of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
In all of our neighborhoods in San Mateo.
In all of them. And so, yeah, having walked around there, you can imagine that having a telecom thing jutting out at any point in any of that beautiful neighborhood that we love so much is just very sad for us. So let's see, and what was our final point?
I wanted to briefly mention, if I have a minute, that, in 2017, in the failed Senate Bill 649, the state of California, as a result of the firefighters' exemption, was a unique development in public record, admitting the dangerous nature of the about-to-be small cell system, because as a matter of provable legislative intent, the firehouses were exempted due to proven negative health effects. I think that's remarkable, and that needs to be really considered that if it's not safe for our firefighters, then it shouldn't be safe in front of our nurseries and bedrooms where we live, sleep, and heal. And yes, the liability issue is tremendous. We have already spoken to our city council, our wonderful city council, who has kindly added this issue to the agenda. According to Andrew Campanelli, the telecom expert attorney that we had spoken to, who spoke to city council, the way the code is now, it is absolutely open with fatal gaps, and it need not be, because the Telecommunications Act in 1996 preserved the power under the general authority to local governments to regulate the placement of these small cell facilities. Contrary to what you've been told by the telecom industry, our hands are not tied, your hands are not tied. You have a lot more power than you are led to believe. And we hope that you do fulfill your duty and authority to the residents of San Mateo. There's so many of us that are just, we do not want this. We don't want this steps from our bedrooms. And we're hoping that we're able to come to some definitive conclusion, hopefully, if not tonight, then ultimately soon, because...
But hopefully tonight.
But hopefully tonight does. Thank you for your time. All right, we have actually...
All right, yeah, actually, we started 30, I'm going to give you extra 30 seconds. We start a little later, so you have about a minute and a half.
Okay. I just want to say one last thing just to bring that
Sure,
home
please.
of the EHT versus FCC. The fact that 11,000 pages of peer-reviewed scientific data showing dangers has already been accepted by the U.S. Court of Appeals in case 2010-25, that served as the basis for their ruling of not to extend those guidelines over 6,000 megahertz. So we can ask, you can ask Crown Castle to provide proof that the FCC has completed its court-mandated work in these rulings. When the court asks for those things to happen, that's a mandate. It's not a request, it's not a suggestion. So thank you so much for your time.
And you can put that pressure back on Crown Castle. And don't they cover the loss? What is?
Oh, and last thing, if for some reason you deny a permit and Crown Castle or another site developer they sue the city, and they go to federal court and win, you do not need to pay them a cent, you do not pay them any lawyer fees, you do not pay them any damages. The worst case scenario is you just have to give the permit, versus what happens when residents start to sue for all kinds of ailments, not only including cancer. Thank you.
Okay. You have another 30 seconds. Are you done?
That's okay, we're done.
You're done?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
All right, great, thank you. Why don't we'll just raise hands. Okay, there we go, great, thank you. All right, super. Thank you, Kelly and? Irina. Okay, thank you very much. You packed a lot in your 15 minutes. Yeah, where is the timer? Yeah, no, we usually have a timer. Yeah.
When the presentation is shared, when the screen is shared, the timer goes away.
Oh, all right. I think then what would be helpful for our speakers is maybe let them know when 5 minutes are up. Right, okay, yep. If we run into that again. Okay, we can open this up for public comment. Do we have people who would like to speak?
One online and one in person.
Okay, so we have one online, and, all right, then we'll give them the full 3 minutes.
Which one?
Why don't we take the in-person first?
That is Alexander Lavery.
Hello. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I'm Dr. Alexander Lavery. I'm a neurosurgeon, and I live right across the street where you are proposing to put a cell phone tower. I take care of patients every day that have glioblastomas that are pretty much a life sentence. And it would be ironic if I take care of people and I end up with a glioblastoma from my bedroom being right less than 100 feet from this. And I plead that you decide not to put this here based on the evidence we just heard, that you can make a difference here. You actually do have some power. Your hands are not tied. And we want to know that this is going to be safe for and for the entire community where we live. And it's just unacceptable to say that that's not something that you can do. It's also definitely an eyesore to be right outside my bedroom window to see that every single day. And I would not want that there. So from the design standpoint, I don't think that it's necessary or needed or should be there. And so I beg that you make a difference tonight, and that's very important to me and my family and the whole community that I take care of on a daily basis. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have our online.
Yes, Henry, one sec. Okay.
I invite you to give me his minute 30 and the other 30 seconds because I have excellent information for you and can answer many of the questions that were improperly answered by your city staff. First of all, de novo review was misrepresented to you. It's as if the case was being heard for the first time, meaning you are not bound by any previous body of evidence. You are bound by the evidence you have received tonight. And you have received substantial written evidence. All 27 volumes, 11,000 pages of evidence is in your record, the same evidence that led to that EHT ruling. We have put written evidence proving there is no guideline above 6,000 megahertz for wireless devices. It is not hard to figure that out. It's right in the ruling. The point is, it was in the order. The order was vacated, meaning wiped out, and remanded, meaning sent back to the FCC for them to address it. They have not addressed it. Look, there's been City of San Mateo code tonight citing the code and the specific findings that you can make as a body tonight to uphold this appeal and to deny the permit. The main reason, there is no guideline for this frequency, period, the end. And you understand that 27,000 volumes of evidence are proving that guideline is not protective, which is why there is a mandate to the FCC. Allowing the FCC to mail this in and not address it, and allowing Crown Castle to continue to go forward is poor public policy in an era where you have no insurance to protect yourself. You're giving these people essentially injury sentences leading to potentially death sentences because you're walking around and listening to Jason as he misinforms you. You are bound to provide actual public safety to your residents. You are not kept from looking at what the law actually says. And what we're providing is the evidence of what it says. Here's the other key thing that you have to understand. You, the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission, tonight have the right under your own code, 1710-080, paragraph B. You can modify your own requirements tonight. You don't have to defer to the director. You can do it right now, tonight, and vote it in tonight. It says, the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission on Appeal shall have discretion to modify or amend any standard conditions of approval on a case-by-case basis as may be necessary or appropriate to protect and promote the public health, safety, and welfare right out of your code. Use that power tonight. Tonight, remove from your code residential zones as a preference. Remove it. It shouldn't be there. Shouldn't have been there to begin with. You have the right to vote on that tonight. And you can apply it to this appeal, and you can change these guidelines forever and protect your residents. We strongly urge you to use the evidence presented to you tonight to do the right thing and uphold this appeal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more speakers? You need to...
No.
A speaker slip? They're in the front of the room there. Okay. If we're going to start having more and more speakers, I'm going to have to limit it to a couple of minutes.
He can go. There are no orange slips here or yellow slips. I think there's slips in the front here. I think there's slips in the front here. There's over here, sir. There's one here.
Okay. How about the gentleman who just, yeah.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. I am a cancer researcher, a basic scientist, and we work on drugs to develop to treat patients of all various types. So I'd like you to take into consideration, not just now, but in the future, There is a thing called the Knudsen law criteria for 2 mutations to cause cancer. If you persistently expose any human being to persistent mutations, whether it's from cell towers, pollution, eventually you're going to lead it to cancer. And so I speak on behalf of this group and other future groups to reduce the amount of exposure to radiation, pollution, that can cause these mutations that can give rise to cancer. Okay, we study this day in and day out. Any eukaryotic cells that get 2 critical mutations can give rise to a malignant cancer. Pretty scary, isn't it? So as my colleague who just talked about gliomas, and for me, who I've worked on pretty much every type of cancer known to man, I would like to just say that reducing this exposure from these cell phone towers is very important. It's critical, and it puts us in a liability chair. The threat of federal law being used to potentially hurt and harm our community, in my opinion, is a form of assault. I feel like I would be hurt as if somebody is hitting me over the head with a sledgehammer, but in this case, using radioactive waves. And with that, I'll give back some of my time to the gentleman, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our final speaker.
Good evening, honorable members of this commission. I happen to be, my wife and I, we happen to live at and in 380 Virginia Avenue. In addition to all of the other information that's been provided to you tonight, I would ask and focus again on the aesthetics. You, Ms. Rowinski, have walked the block, okay? My driveway has a good assortment of appendages and attachments to it. That pole and that proposed cell site would be the only and most obtrusive thing I'd have to look out my window, my living room window. So from an aesthetic standpoint, I strongly urge you to consider that in your your rulemaking tonight. In addition to the fact that when you so aptly ask, Madam Chair, were there any alternatives, least it's going in size, small to large? Apparently, the representatives of the applicant, Crown Castle, failed to even answer your most direct question. I urge you, please, to consider our appeal. Not to mention that I am the 2nd generation owner of that house. I grew up in that house. My wife and I purchased it from my mom and dad, who lived there since 1952. So we have a long history and a long-standing love of this city, and have always received quality consideration, quality judgment, and concern for the citizens. I ask you, please, tonight, to consider that the adverse effects aesthetically. I mean, I know that outside the legal bounds, I will confine mine to the aesthetics. Anybody, I invite you all to stand right in my living room, the one view window I have on that corner, and what you saw would be, again, I invite you all to come and take a look and see what it would be like. I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close public comment on this appeal and bring this back to the commission. I'm going to open it up and maybe have Ms. Hall, maybe our attorney, maybe address or respond to some of the issues that were presented. And some of the issues that I noted, and I don't think I have them all, was the fact that the Ericsson pulses at 28 megahertz. What, I'm sorry? 28,000, I'm sorry, yes, 28,000 megahertz. And the applicant's position that the FCC has regulatory authority up to 6,000 megahertz was one issue that was brought up. Is that the case? Another has to do with general liability insurance. Is the city open to lawsuits as it relates to EM health issues? There was a discussion about NEPA. And also to the fact that the commission can actually modify this without the director's approval or insight. Those were some of the, those were the four I picked up. Commissioners, are there any others that, because I think it's important we get some of these addressed through Ms. Hall and our staff attorney to help guide us.
Yeah, and I have there's another question of, when we talk about aesthetics, are we talking about aesthetics assuming infrastructure, right? Which is what I read the design guide as having. It's like, tweaking something, assuming it exists, and making that thing as aesthetically pleasing as possible. But what the public commenters are saying is that they would like the permit to be denied, essentially, because of aesthetics of a whole neighborhood, which would preclude any infrastructure, theoretically, any of the red or blue or green dots on the map, period, from being in that community specifically for community level aesthetics. And I would love some clarification on that as well.
Sure, yeah. And I also want to mention to everyone, I did speak to some people who are in your neighborhood are very supportive of this installation. And they do want the extra coverage. They're not here tonight, but there are people who are, yeah. Anyway, I do want to share that with you in walking the neighborhood. Nope, I'm sorry, yep. Anyway, please.
I guess it wasn't clear to me that this isn't cell phone, this is cable? This is for broadband. Broadband.
Thank you, yes, and I think that's the point.
And another question I had, but I don't think it could be answered today, but I am curious, when the public said, the neighborhoods are littered with this, do we have a map that shows how we've been tracking these and how many are really in the neighborhood and how far apart they are and to have a better understanding of the size of this issue?
Yes, we actually have a GIS map on our webpage for small cell, and it shows all the applications that have been submitted under review and have been either denied or in progress.
Okay, I need to do my homework.
Can I show her the map?
Actually, Jason, yeah, okay.
Jason might do it all.
Yeah, yep. Okay.
Pull it up too, yeah, thank you.
All right. So anyway, let's, Ms. Hall and our attorney, if we could help us with some of the legal technicalities that were brought to our attention. Like I said, I raised 4 of them that I noted.
Sure, I'm available.
So let's open up here, Ms. Hall, regarding the 28 megahertz versus the 6,000 megahertz, the 28,000 versus the 6,000. We can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
The speaker over the phone stated that the FCC order was vacated, and I believe that they're referring to the 2019 FCC order. And I just want to clarify that that order does not contain the FCC RF emission standards. So it's not that the court, vacated the standards that were in place. It's kind of a weird, it's addressed this 2019 order.
Sure, Ms. Hall, yeah, I think we're talking about EHT versus FCC.
Yes, correct.
Right. That's
so. In that case, it was the court addressed the 2019 order, which was an inquiry into whether any changes to the FCC's RF exposure limits were warranted by changes in science or technology. And the FCC concluded in their order that changes were not warranted. And the court reversed the part in the order that closed the FCC's inquiry. So basically, what the court was saying is, if the FCC wants to conclude or close its inquiry into whether changes should be made to RF standards, then they need to follow the instructions. And that was what one of the speakers was saying, that they need to address impacts to radiation on children and health implications for long-term exposure. However, my understanding is, the court did not actually require the FCC to revisit or change the RF emission standards. And in the court case, the court actually says, we're not taking a position an environmental.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Wait, back up. You broke out. The court says we're not taking a position
on the scientific debate regarding the health of RF radiation. So overall, at this time, the impact of this case on the city's review process does not seem meaningful. Ultimately, we kind of were back at zero in that the RF standards that were in existence before the 2019 order still remain. And as such, the city, and that is
oh, you're breaking up again.
Yeah, you've got to rewind.
The original standards are what the city, you said something about the city.
The city has to abide by them because the actual RF emission standards were not vacated in that court case.
And then the RF standards that are the original ones that are still intact at the FCC are the ones, is it factually true that it's 6,000 and below in terms of the megahertz?
That's more of a technical question.
Who can answer that question then?
I can answer that question.
Thanks, Jason.
I actually just checked the Code of Federal Regulations this morning. Their website, last amended October 30th, 2023, subpart 1.1310 has a table for RF emissions maximum permissible exposure. It goes up to 100,000 megahertz.
Okay, I thought that's what we talked about in another case like months ago. It was significantly larger than any of the figures I heard today.
As being permissible, up to 100?
MPE, maximum permissible exposure.
So hold on, through the chair, I'm sorry, we really do need the public to respect our deliberations here, and I.
Right, everyone,
Thank you. So Jason, essentially, the distinction between 6,000 and the three pieces of infrastructure at 28,000 are technically moot for the purposes of reviewing this permit appeal?
In the case of it, they have regulations.
The FCC has spoken to all of it. What I'm hearing from you is the FCC has spoken to all of this. Therefore, because the FCC has spoken to all of this, the city is preempted from doing anything on RF emissions, just as we were preempted 3 months ago.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
There are
Thank
FCC
you.
regulations in place for 28 gigahertz, 28,000 megahertz, and so if that complies, we are preempted from appealing against it for RF emissions.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead with the next one.
You have,
No, keep going with those other clarifications. I was
Okay.
wanting to hear.
Sure. Let's go to the NEPA. There was, the city need not follow NEPA, but Crown Castle has to follow NEPA. Does that have any impact on? It is one of the bases in this appeal. Ms. Hawley, I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So yes, the FCC, so as the federal agency taking a federal action here, the FCC.
I'm sorry, yep, we lost you again. Yeah. I'm wondering if you can call in.
Sure, what is?
Yeah, let me give you, let me get that number for you. And, you know, you can keep your video on and then speak to us at the same time. Let me just get that. Okay, that number is 408 638 0968.
Okay.
And then jot this down too. You'll need to enter conference code ID number 89 77 19 15 21, the number 3. So 89 77 19 15 21, the number 3. And then there's a 6-digit passcode 880430. Press pound, and then press *9 to raise your hand, and *6 to unmute. And I think that should, I'm hoping, help us in this conversation.
Madam Chair, if I may make a suggestion.
Please.
Perhaps we can do a 5-minute recess while we get these technical difficulties handled.
Okay, we could do that. Okay, we have a backup, which is the phone, and we'll take a 5-minute recess on the technicality. So we'll be back here at a little after 8:35. Okay, 5, everyone. Okay. You sound worse than me. Oh. Here, yeah. No, I have.
I think I got a hole.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, we're going to restart here. And let's see, Ms. Hall, I see some earbuds. Are you on a phone? Yeah. We can't hear you. On your earbuds, on that microphone, there is a plus, there is a volume control at the top of the microphone.
Hello?
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so we're gonna go by phone, it looks like. Okay. Okay. So, we stopped and we were going to talk about the NEPA.
Yes.
Yeah, and so Crown Castle needs to follow NEPA, the city does not. How does that work within the context of this appeal?
Yes, so the FCC has to engage in NEPA environmental review process because they're the federal agency taking action here. And under NEPA, the burden is actually on the applicant, so Crown Castle here, to determine whether the project maybe qualifies for an exemption or an exclusion, or the applicant has to prepare environmental review studies if the applicant determines that an exclusion does not fit here. The city itself is not a party to this environmental review process, unlike with CEQA. So there are no requirements for the city to request documentation of the NEPA review process or any documentation that an exemption applies. And that's the reason that the city does not have, or doesn't require it as part of the application packet to provide NEPA documentation. At least that's how, the application is currently, how the application is currently required by the city. I don't know if that answers the question.
Sure.
Through the chair. So Stephanie, just to clarify, the city is not a party to NEPA because it's a federal law. This is a relationship between the FCC and Crown Castle directly. And so in parallel to whatever city permitting that's done, Crown Castle and FCC are, going through another process to either get a categorical exclusion through NEPA or whatever, NEPA review is needed. Is that correct? In parallel?
Yes, correct.
The city does not see any of that. It currently, as written in the laws, the city does not see any of that, nor does it really need to because it's not a party to any of that.
Correct. The city does not require to see it, and it's not required to ask about it.
And so when the infrastructure is built on any of these poles, or this pole and specifically, at that point, the Crown Council would have gotten, I assume, would be a categorical exclusion and all the permitting from the city. So everything would all be approved at that time regardless, or when does the NEPA approval actually happen? Or categorical exclusions?
I don't believe that they need to tell the city about a categorical exemption. As I said, we're not really involved with that, so I think that would be something that Crown Castle would have to have already addressed before the facility is installed.
Okay, but basically, is there some sort of affidavit that they send to us? I'm sorry if I forget seeing this in the documents. Is there some kind of affidavit?
The city does not require that. I know some cities do require that, but the city of San Mateo does not, and it's not something that the city has to require of applicants.
Got it, thank you.
Okay. So the city's not bound by NEPA, Crown is, but we are not, the city does not require an affidavit as it relates to NEPA compliance within the context of within the context of a permit.
Correct.
Okay.
yes, the project is not, exempt from NEPA by any means, but we're just not involved, the city.
Right, we're not involved, okay. There was brought up about general liability, that is insurance not providing, I'm going to now change to the another matter that was brought up regarding insurance and general liability insurance regarding EM radiation is not offered to antenna providers, so therefore the city is opening itself up for lawsuits as it relates to EM radiation health damage. Did I get that correct? Jason, did I get that? I'm paraphrasing here.
What the speaker on the phone mentioned about insurance?
Yeah.
I believe that's what they said. Basically, that the city, that Crown doesn't have insurance in a certain realm.
Right, so therefore the city is open up for liability. And I see our attorney. Yeah, please.
Chair Lewinsky, I can address that. I can't comment on whether it's insurable or not. I do not have that knowledge. But the question of insurance and liability and whether the city is liable are two different questions. Insurance is about coverage when there is liability. For me, I can't speak into the liability as to RF emissions. I'm not a technical expert. Again, that's subject to this appeal. But what I can speak to is these permits. The master license agreement includes indemnification provisions from Crown Castle to the city.
Okay, and that's what, yeah, so that's what I figured, indemnifications are in place. Okay. And I think that then addresses an issue someone raised regarding exposing the city to lawsuits as it relates to EM. So the city would not be held liable based on the indemnification provisions that are in place.
If I may just reframe that, it's not that the city wouldn't be hypothetically liable. Again, these are all hypotheticals.
Right.
But in the case of a suit relating to a permit in a Crown Castle installation, they're required to indemnify the city.
Right. Okay, so they indemnify the city. And what does that mean in practical terms?
I'm going to expand a little bit. They're required to indemnify and defend the city. So that would mean they would have counsel defend the city. They would pay damages as well.
Okay. All right. Okay, then the last item I noted was, I think Henry brought this up, that the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission can change the ordinance, the design standards without the approval of the director. Did I, Commissioners, I'm paraphrasing, yes. Yeah. I wrote down here 17.10.008B, 17.10.080B.
Madam Chair, if I may, on behalf of the department.
Please. Yep.
I'm reviewing the section right now, the 17.10.080 subdivision B appears to grant the commission some authority if it's to protect and promote public health, welfare, et cetera. But keep in mind also the scope of appeal can't consider RF emissions. So if it's to promote the public health, it can't be it has to be unrelated to RF emissions, and any alleged health issues are related to those RF emissions, so long as they're within the FCC standards.
Please.
If I may clarify, in other words, to promote public health and safety unrelated to RF emissions.
Can you be more specific about what it can relate to under public health and safety?
Well, under that section, it could be a whole host of different scenarios. The possibilities could be just the particular location of the installation. Maybe it's too close to some trees. Maybe some trees are damaged there. Maybe there could be a damage to the tree where it could fall. It could be a number of different things. I think, again, they're all hypotheticals. But I think what should be kept in mind is that, again, it all goes back to the scope of appeal can't be based on RF emissions and health concerns so long as it's within those FCC regulations. So the promotion of public health has to be for other considerations.
Okay. Right. So basically, promotion of public health outside of anything related to RF. Like I said, if there's a tree,
there could be a number of scenarios that could be unaccounted for by staff. If there's something that's brought by an appellant that says, this particular installation poses a hazard to the public health, again, unrelated to RF emissions, that's something that this commission could consider.
Sure. And as one that visited and actually visited every pole, there wasn't anything very apparent to me that I saw in terms of some sort of impact on public health outside of RF. Okay, please, Commissioner.
Can you explain it just so that it's clear why we cannot consider RF emissions?
That's preempted by FCC regulations, and there's under federal law, the city's preempted from doing so.
I can I jump in?
Sure,
real
please.
quick?
Stephanie.
Just to add on to that, so in addition to the FCC regulations, so United States Code 332, the local governments cannot prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting, I apologize, hold on. Sorry, I was trying to pull it up. Okay, yes, United States Code 332C7, it states that as long as a proposed facility meets FCC standards for RF emissions, local governments may not consider RF emissions. So in addition to the FCC orders that we're talking about, it's also in the United States Code.
Okay. Okay.
Through the chair, I had the last question about the definition of aesthetics that we're talking about. Could you, and maybe it's to Jason, or could you explain what we mean by aesthetics in the design standards? Because, again, I had interpreted aesthetics to be assuming there's infrastructure that is built, how to make that as pretty as possible. Here are some design standards to help guide, wire placement and, stuff like that. The public comment has talked about aesthetics at the neighborhood level to decline this permit, which, like I mentioned, would preclude any of the dots, theoretically, from being an allowed permitted area. Could you speak to that? Is that within legal bounds to consider?
Thank you. Great question. So on the grounds of restricting the entire neighborhood or, say, residential zoning, that would go against the United States Code 332 that Stephanie had mentioned, which the next statement from the one she mentioned says that you cannot, it's probably the same statement. You can't prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting a provider's ability to provide service. And by restricting a zoning, a residential zone, that would be in effect of prohibiting them.
Thank you.
Right. So from a practical perspective, if we were even denying this, Crown could come back and propose another small cell installation within that same neighborhood.
Correct.
Right. So, please, yep.
I'm assuming other cities, our neighboring cities, are dealing with similar challenges with these cell towers. I have do you know if there's some sort of best practices that cities are sharing with one another, that how to manage, not looking at RF and aesthetic and public health and their design guidelines?
As far as a large effort among the agencies, I'm not aware of one. I know other agencies that are dealing with it, like our neighbors Foster City, have also have been built out, but as far as a collective effort, I'm not aware of one.
Through the chair, I also have another question. So going back to this, we're dealing with a lot of these appeals. We want to honor the public and hear all of them accordingly. And at the same time, it's becoming more and more clear to me that the design standards need something. And so I was curious if the director was planning at some point in the next year to, with the director's discretion, revisit the design standards and solicit feedback from the public on potential changes to the design standards in this way.
Good evening, Deputy Director Matt Fabry, and I can't comment on, I'll defer to Jason in terms of what plans we may have in place to do so. I think Jason indicated there are certain things that we have identified that we may want to clarify as part of those, but I'm not aware, given my newness in this role, in terms of whether or not we have plans to bring anything back in terms of a process to take them back for public comment. I think there are other things that we have to bring back to the council in terms of changes in law with regard to batching applications that may require us to go back to council and modify our ordinance. And I'll look to Jason to correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong. And that would probably be potentially an opportunity to consider whether we'd want to go through a process that would include looking at the design standards. I think obviously if we were modifying the design standards, they would have to be still within the context of what we are allowed to regulate on, and we'd be restricted from things like prohibiting service and coverage in terms of we can't just suddenly say we're going to change the design standards to leave out residential neighborhoods. So I think if there are things that we can clarify, or if there's ways that we can improve the aesthetic piece of it and make the installations more less obtrusive or more aesthetically appealing, I think those are the kind of things that we'd have the ability to modify in terms of the design standards.
Because theoretically within scope, I've heard nothing that suggests in the design standards the city couldn't, like, the city seems to have the discretion within the design standards to potentially provide guidance to companies that islands, right, would be preferential to in front of a home. Like that kind of guidance even within a zone, I have not heard being
I think it sounds
illegal.
like, according to what Jason talked about tonight, I think we would have the ability to do that. But I think the other challenge that we still are faced with is that we have no ability to regulate the provider's need for capacity and coverage. And so if they tell us that that location does not meet our capacity and coverage needs and that we need to be 2 blocks away to meet our capacity and coverage needs, I still do not believe we'd have the ability to say you need to go to that island. So we can definitely make it a preference in terms of that sort of approach, is my understanding, and I'll let Jason correct me if I'm wrong, but we're still going to be ultimately limited in terms of what the providers tell us in terms of their capacity and coverage needs, which we can't control.
And in the training next month, is there an opportunity to better understand the level of discretion this commission should provide to statements about capacity and coverage? Like, how are we supposed to know, like, does Crown sign an affidavit saying, like, we are telling the whole truth, that this is it for capacity and coverage? Like, how are we as commissioners supposed to make an informed decision in an appeal with declarative statements like that, when without training to understand, technical training to understand how to ask smart questions on issues like capacity and coverage?
I think we can definitely bring that to the folks that are going to be providing the training to say that that's one of the topics that the commission would like to have guidance on in terms of the training.
Because what I'm hearing is like we're essentially next month being asked to become technical experts, legal experts, and on this issue in a way that I had not necessarily emotionally or mentally prepared myself this year, having 2 young children. But I'm going to rally and I'm going to do it. But could you? I mean, you know what I mean? Like how will we be set up for success to be able to better understand these issues? Because obviously the community is deeply concerned, and I want to honor that.
Sure. If I can just go in, I think what we have to do, and I was going to talk about this tonight, so I might as well do it now, is the commissioners should send to Jason items that you want to have covered next month.
Okay.
And I will let that also be known to the other commissioners as well, as a starting point. And then you can start to collate and gather on this. And I could envision, by the way, there could possibly be more than one training session. And I'm not going to use the word training. For all of you that don't know, I was actually part of the commission. I actually was involved in writing the original ordinance back in 2017. So I go back quite a ways and know a bit about this. And look, I understand your frustration, but the law allows it. There are people who do want it. We have many, many installations throughout the city. And as you heard, even if we were denied this one, Crown could come back and move back into the neighborhood as well. So into your zone, I'll call it your zone or your pod. Sometimes we call them pods. So, but that's what I think would be useful, just going back to, is sending to Jason, if that's okay, items that the commissioners would like to cover. And then you can start to create an outline and work around what we believe we need, since we're the ones that have to sit up here and listen to people and become legal and technical experts.
Yeah, through the chair. And the question I have is, with city attorney mentioning the level of discretion that the commission potentially does have when it comes to public health and safety, not RF emissions, in terms of design standards, like that opens up a whole can of worms that I'm unwilling to open up without deeper understanding of these issues. Like, I'm open to it, I'm open to doing that, but not without better understanding of these issues. And so just to preview, like, that to me is like one of the things I'm holding in the back of my mind is how do I serve as the best commissioner possible, on questioning the design standards in a more rigorous fashion going forward in terms of what the possible spectrum is of what is legally allowed for the city to consider.
Okay. All right, have we exhausted questions? Does anyone have any final comments before we go to motion? No, actually, the rebuttal is if there was a public comment that did not support the appeal, and I did not hear any. Yeah, but no, a rebuttal, I understand, is only if there was public comment that did not support the appeal. And I did not hear public comment that did not support the appeal.
It's just frustrating because our expert that we have on the phone could answer a lot of these questions day in, day out.
I understand, and he or she, is that Henry? Henry, yeah. Henry has spoken. Right. No, I'm sorry. Henry has spoken, and I think we have a lot of facts. What you have presented to us, and what has been provided to us. Sure. So we'll go final comment, and then we'll do motion. Any final comments, please?
Yeah. So I just wanted to express deep appreciation to the presenters and the folks who appealed and all the other folks who spoke today. I remember your testimony about health months ago, which was also excellent back then, even more excellent today. And the level of compelling information and deep sophistication of this crowd was really inspiring. So thank you for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And your testimony or your presentation helped to unlock deeper understanding in me of what is legally allowed by the director, legally allowed by me as a commissioner. And so I really appreciate learning from you. And this is the kind of advocacy I would love to see every single commission meeting on every single topic. So, I hope that you spread your joy to also complete streets and building electrification, which are other issues that need lots of wonderful, compelling, brilliant, sophisticated, insights. So please continue to engage in this commission. I deeply appreciated this. I've never seen a public presentation so excellent. So I just really wanted to impart that appreciation to you on that front. This issue is deeply frustrating. I have I got one of the letters because I am within 500 feet of one of these installations myself, so in my home, after I bought the home. So I'm very empathetic on a factual and emotional level to this. But we have to act as the commission based upon unfortunately, the constraints. And so I haven't heard enough on in terms of flexing on the constraints that would allow me to feel very confident that we can go forward and do the ambitious things that Henry has articulated in his public comment. And I just want to make that very clear. But I do appreciate the engagement on this issue. And that continued engagement forces the commission, it forces the city to do better. This is one of the only ways we will do better, is by having your continued engagement on these issues. And so please do continue to hold us accountable to being good commissioners and to being good city staff and to being good city council members for you. So thank you.
Commissioner Michael, hard act to follow, huh?
Yeah, that was excellent.
Really hard act to follow.
I echo a lot of that, and I hope you see here, tonight that how much we honor your comments and how we're also trying to figure out what exactly we're empowered with and how we could improve that and learn and figure out, how to address these issues in the long term and in the formal process that allows us to do so. And I hope you'll continue participating in that.
So there isn't anything that my two fellow commissioners have not said that I can say, but I do want to say thank you. Look, I have across my home 2 of these. I have 2. So, and they're going to go through the whole city. I'm sorry to hear that, but they are. I think what's going to be a real interesting installation challenge is if they go into backyards, right? And I will share with everyone, when we put the ordinance together, we started specifically on the public right-of-way as a preference. So, and stay tuned for that one. But I cannot emphasize, it's great to hear from all of you. We have a lot of big issues coming down the pipe. I cannot underestimate the transition from gas to electrification and that whole process and the out-of-pocket costs that individuals will incur on that. So we would love to see you come back for some of that. We heard from Allison on some bicycle safety issues. That's coming back next month. So stay engaged, stay with us, make us better, hold the city accountable, hold the commission accountable. Okay? We all get better. Everybody gets better. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve or deny this appeal?
I move to deny the appeal.
Okay. And staff recommendation is to deny the appeal and uphold the conditional approval for the permit. Madam Clerk, we have two motions. Can you please take a vote? Vote. Yeah.
2 motions?
Yeah, we have a motion, now we have to vote.
Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Commissioner Narita?
So I my own denial of the appeal, correct?
Yes, this is to
Then it's an
deny
aye.
the appeal.
Aye.
Chair Rowinski?
I deny the appeal.
Commissioner Michael?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay. And once again, everyone, thank you. And I know it's not the outcome you wanted, but There's nothing here that really mandated us to change what was to change what the city has put into place. You'll have plenty of other opportunities to do some of this. And particularly on the electrification, everyone, we're going to start to develop that plan in 2024, and you'll be at the ground level, and that's the time to get involved. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Jason. Thank you, Kelly, and Crown Castle, Ms. Hall. All right. So we have a final item on tonight's agenda, reports and announcements. Anything from staff and commission? No. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I implore you to get better legal advice that's not coming from the telecom industry.
I'm sorry, thank you. You could write us.
Okay, we will. Please read it, please read it.
Right, we read every email, trust me.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, reports and announcements. Does anybody have anything they would like to share? Please,
Through
Matt.
the chair, I did want to provide a little bit of information in terms of the December 13th meeting, where we do plan to provide this training. Given that training may itself be lengthy, we may also have additional small cell appeals that would have to be heard that evening, and then we also have the quarterly bicycle and pedestrian update. Staff is looking into whether we could potentially shift the start time to 6 o'clock. That would require it to be considered a special
Do
meeting.
we have to do bike and pede update next month?
I will double check again with Sue Ellen. I asked her that question. She said yes because
It's in some sort of ordinance to do it quarterly, but we could also ask the city council to see if we can not reset it.
it's something to be considered a BPAC that you have to have a certain frequency of meetings is what Sue Ellen told me, but we can look into that again.
Yeah,
to
there's
see.
got to be a way, otherwise we'll be here till,
Yeah, so.
Is the training happening in the public forum? How
It would be at the commission meeting, and that's where we're proposing to potentially move the start time up to 6 o'clock, which would require us to make that a special meeting. And so one of the things we're checking is just to make sure that all of the items on the agenda could be considered under a special meeting as opposed to a regular meeting. We don't think that's an issue, but we want to double check that. So if everything looks good on our side, then we probably would then send an email to all the commissioners to poll whether or not you're available and willing to start at 6 o'clock instead. So we do want to make enough time for the training, and also be considerate to the public and not start too early in terms of people getting off work and wanting to get here. So 6 o'clock seemed like the earliest.
And then you're saying we possibly might have some appeals, Matt?
I'll let Jason fill in if he knows anything, but we, continue to approve permits,
Right.
and so there's potential that there could be appeals.
Yeah, there's a potential.
Yeah, I would assume there's plenty of approvals coming this next month.
Right. So let's talk to Sue Ellen and see if we can, I had suggested this be done in a study session, but this training be done in a study session, but I guess it has to be done in the public forum.
I think the training could be done as a study session. I think the intent is to make it in a public meeting so that the public can participate.
Right.
So I think we could look at a study session. So we will explore all of our options in terms of how we can do the training earlier as possible. I guess if there's any guidance from the commissioners on the dais right now in terms of what time you would potentially want us to look at starting, if 6 o'clock is the earliest, or if we could consider going earlier, we'd be happy to look at that, and whether or not the three of you are willing to look at an earlier start time.
Yeah, I think council starts sometimes at 5.
So, yeah, the special meetings usually start at 5:30, I think, for study sessions.
So could we maybe have the first hour be the study session and then at 7 start the regular meeting?
We could, except typically when you have a study session and then start the regular meeting, then you tend to put the if you don't finish the study session, you'd have to push that to the end of your regular meeting. So if we were doing the training and we wanted it, assuming that the training is going to go on for, multiple hours, I don't know if it will or not. I have no idea. I just imagine there will be a healthy dialogue and questions back and forth. And we don't know for certain, but we expect that there would be public comment, significant public comment, and it may be similar to what happened at council in terms of they may, try to do a coordinated group presentation that would be a 15-minute presentation similar to what happened on Monday night.
Format-wise, I was curious if, we could have pre-reading where, the person who gave presentation at the city council meeting could provide a brief or something, whatever written documents he wanted to, what was his name? No, not Henry, it was a different guy.
Andrew Caponelli?
Yeah, that guy. Can he provide a brief or a memo? And can Henry provide a memo or whatever? Because this is not productive when the public is doing what it was doing with let's rebut with this Henry. That's not helpful. And so I would rather have everything on the record, in a written form from all the stakeholders who are interested, and then we can read it and then ask questions. Because right now, we are operating based upon he said, she said, they said, we said, and it's actually not productive. And that's what makes me nervous about this training, is that we could leave the training and be even more confused.
Yeah, I think, actually, it's a good point. Some of this, could we use a case study and work around that? I mean, to provide us legal and technical concepts, as opposed to something amorphous. In fact, I would probably use this appeal.
I think that we heard from folks on Monday night at the council meeting. We heard from folks tonight. I think that we have probably a decent understanding of positions from the public and the folks that they've been talking to, that I think that we can make sure that the folks that are doing the training are aware of all of that information. I think the goal for the training is not to be a back and forth rebuttal of things presented by the public. It's intended to provide training to the commission in terms of how you should act in terms of, reviewing and implementing our ordinance and hearing appeals. We're also going to be providing training for staff that are working on these projects. I think during the day we'll provide training to staff and then training to the commission in the evening. So that's the goal, is to provide training on how you can do your jobs better, as opposed to we need to respond to everything that's being provided by the public.
I totally understand, but one of the ways that we need to be able to navigate some of these legal arguments that are being presented.
Yeah, and so I think that we have what's been provided, which I think has been provided on Monday night at the city council meeting via their 15-minute presentation. A lot of it is similar to what was provided tonight, so I think that we can provide that information to the trainers so that they're fully aware of what issues the council or the commission is being presented with in terms of concerns on these appeals, and ask that they be prepared to provide training that helps you to understand whether or not the information that's being provided is factual or accurate and how it fits in with our ordinance. And I'd defer, I guess, to Ling if he has any contrary opinions on that.
Or I was just gonna, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's still being developed. I mean, that's something that we can definitely provide input for what we'd like to see. And it sounds like there's already a plan to email Jason with items that the commission would like to have covered, and hopefully that will be covered in part of the training, but it's still being developed, as right now it's in its early stages.
Right.
By when would you want those documents sent to you, or just our list sent to you?
Oh, as soon as possible?
Okay.
Okay. All right. And Jason, we'll send out an email to Monday. I'm out of town for work tomorrow. But maybe you can send out an email on my behalf asking everyone to send to you maybe the top 3 or 4 items that they would like to have covered during the training. I would say I would start sooner. I would ask Sue Ellen if we can move the Pede and Bike update to January, assuming we have appeals. Now, my question is, if we do have appeals, does the training take place before or after? And and what we learn, is that applicable to those appeals?
I think the intent would be to provide the training in advance of hearing any appeals.
Right,
So that
okay.
you'd be fully informed going into those appeals.
Right. Okay.
And then just, unless there's anything else on that, I was just going to mention that, the January meeting, we do have tentative a presentation on the local roadway safety plan. We've got an item on the 28th Avenue gap closure. And then we normally do our Public Works year in review in December, which we pushed to January, recognizing these. And so we have that scheduled for January. Obviously, that's an item that we can continue to push if we need to, but it's our chance to give the commission sort of a year in review of what's been going on in Public Works. So it's not critical time-wise, but we
Right.
would like to give that at some point.
I would say, Matt, I think we have to get on the radar screen. We have to review the design standards. Once again, they were initially completed in 2017 when they went into effect in 2018. So I think it's time for an update. And it took us, by the way, a year to do this ordinance and many late meetings. But design standards, I don't know if there's, I'm thinking the appeal, maybe narrowing some of that, giving us, it's time to maybe revisit the appeal process in terms of what can and can't, though it's pretty clear. I will share with you, I think it's interesting from my perspective, one who had written the ordinance, or part of that, team to write it, to now start to see how it plays out. I look at these appeals, by the way, as a laboratory. To me, they're a laboratory to see what we can improve on, what works, what needs a little help. So that's how I'm approaching this. Yep.
Madam Chair, if I may, I do have to play lawyer here, but I think we're getting into unagendized discussion.
Sure.
I think
Okay.
that
All
these are
right.
some reports and announcements. I think Matt was just polling, if you are available, the commissioners at 6 p.m., if an earlier start time would make sense for all three of you.
Right. Okay. And we can let Jason know. So give Jason your top 3 or 4 and your start time.
Yeah, so
5 or 6.
I'll suggest that staff will email all 5 commissioners, and we will request your input on what you'd like to see on the training, as well as we'll pull you on your availability if we determine that it's feasible for us to change the start time.
Okay. All righty. Okay, everyone. On that, our next commission, December 13th, start time is TBD. This meeting is now adjourned. Good night. What was it, Ed Morrow? Good night and stay safe.